Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles. My name is Danny De Lillo. I'm delighted to be joined by Ben Proudfoot, who literally is on set right now with us. He's taken the time out to talk about his film that he had with us in our film festival, the Lost Astronaut. How you doing, Ben?
I'm great. How are you?
It's awesome. It's very good. I'm so glad that you brought the Lost Astronaut to us, but for those that haven't seen it, let's take a look at a clip.
Could have been the first black guy in space. Is that my fate that I'll be remembered for that? For something that I didn't do. Think about that one. How the hell you get famous for something you didn't do?
The next president of the United States on his shoulders will rest burdens heavier than have rested on the shoulders of any president since the time of Lincoln.
Ben, I know you make a lot of short documentaries. I don't quite know how you make so many because you make a lot. And what I love about the work that you do, you make documentaries about really important subjects or heroes or things we should be talking about. And I love that about discovering you and discovering your work. For the Lost Astronaut, for those that haven't seen it, tell us a brief synopsis of your documentary.
Sure. Thank you again for having me. So the Lost Astronaut is a profile of Ed Dwight Jr., who is, he lives in Denver. He's in his late 80s, and it's his telling of his experience in training as an astronaut for the United States, and his subsequent career as a sculptor. And it's part of a series called Almost Famous that we're doing with the New York Times about people who, if history had gone a little differently, might well be household names. And it's a rumination on legacy, on race in America, on the power of art, on all kinds of things. And it was an amazing experience, really getting to know Ed and turning his story into a film.
I'm so glad that you made this because I couldn't even look away for a millisecond. I was captivated by Ed Dwight Jr., who is a phenomenal human being, and just has so much heart and passion and love, and it just screams out of the screen. It's wonderful. Obviously, it's just part of a series, Almost Famous for the New York Times, but where the inspiration come for you in deciding to say we need to make a story about him?
About Ed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just couldn't believe his story. I mean, I think if you read about or heard about a story of an African-American Air Force pilot that got recruited to become the first African-American astronaut in the Kennedy administration and then was basically drummed out, that would have been enough of a story.
Yeah.
But the fact that after that, he became an incredibly accomplished and prolific, super prolific artist, and had created so many monuments and memorials to African-American heroes when he himself had kind of been robbed of that status. I just couldn't believe it was a true story. And I don't know, as a documentary filmmaker, that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for something that's so truly embodies the word incredible. That's hard to believe.
Yeah.
Because that's such a great driver to find, the reality of the story and how did this happen and how is this possible? So for me, as soon as I read the story and talked to Ed on the phone, I knew that this would be not only perfect for our series, but we needed to document it right away.
I'm glad you said that, Ben, because I was screaming out of the screen thinking, why, just why this guy was just, destined to be a hero in one field. And it was just so horrible to see that his dreams was taken away. But it was mesmerizing just to hear even though that he'd gone through all of that and that heartache, that horrible heartache that he had to go through during this time in America that, you know, sadly still repercussions are here existing today. But I couldn't believe just his character and how, what a beautiful soul this man was. Was it amazing for you as a documentary filmmaker to kind of unravel what a wonderful personality is, and how he transformed from something where he could have gone in a completely different direction, but he ended up being, you know, one of the best sculpturists. I mean, he did it. It's 18,000 gallery pieces that he's got, and 129 memorials, which is phenomenal. Was it amazing for you as director to kind of unravel him and discover who he was and what he's become?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, what was most moving was just the opportunity to be a part of it. You know, by no means did I discover Ed's story. A lot of other storytellers have identified that has a great story. Certainly, I was able to put it in a short documentary format, and with our partnership with the Times, bring it to hopefully a broader audience. But I just count myself lucky to have been in his orbit, and really had the opportunity to magnify his story. And that's really how I see my role as a doc filmmaker. It's less about Ben Proudfoot's vision of the world and much more about our ability as filmmakers to give a platform for non-filmmakers to tell their story to a broad audience, because that's really the bridge that needs to be built, is people whose stories we need to hear. We need to make films about them, but a lot of times, you know, it's such a reserved economy around feature-length documentaries or, you know, documentary series or whatever, that it's hard to kind of get these projects off the ground. And I was honored that Ed agreed to do it, and that we were able to find a way to make it all happen.
Well, speaking of, as you described his orbit, I felt like watching it, you kind of literally took us in his orbit. Like it was mesmerizing, and I love the way that it was shot, because, you know, the particular kind of close-ups of him and his reaction to the experience he had in his life. Was that something that you kind of wanted to give your audience, to get real close to really understanding what he was feeling and going through, because there was so much in his face that told us so much?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's funny, we get a lot of YouTube comments about how tight the interview frame is, and honestly, the reason why we did that is for two reasons. One, because I know, having made as many short docs as I have, that most people are watching them on their phones, right? And most documentary frames are like this, and you can kind of hardly see the person's face. And I want to get closer. Like I want to see, you know, the crow's feet in people's eyes and the little movements in their mouth, because that's what I pay attention to as a human being. When I'm talking to somebody, I get so much information from all the subtlety. So that was a big reason why I wanted people who are watching it on their phone to be able to get all the detail in somebody's face. Yeah. And these are intimate conversations. And so it just made sense that we would create an intimate frame. And that's really why we made that decision.
No, it worked. Well, I mean, there was obviously, you took us on quite a journey with, you know, the backstory and the moments throughout history in which, you know, he was involved in and affected by. How do you, I mean, it's a lot. Obviously, you've got a good partner in whom you're working with, but what's kind of the hardest thing about assembling, you know, someone's history and that time and the research and all of those things? What's kind of the hardest job for you as a documentary filmmaker in assembling the sort of archival footage, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, you touched on something important, which is the role of the editor. You know, I've long thought that the editor should have some kind of differentiation in their credit. In documentaries, they have an outsized hand in the authorship of a documentary. So it's very, very, very much in partnership with the editor. So the editor is kind of like the essential person. honestly, I share authorship with whoever that person is. In this case, it was Nick Wright, who was the editor with me on The Lost Astronaut. And I mean, you know, it's one thing to get all the archival, and it's another thing to make sure that the archival is accurate. He talks about the centrifuge and the tears coming out of the eyes and hitting your ears. And so, you know, it's not just about finding footage of a NASA, you know, centrifuge. You have to find the right centrifuge that he was at during the right time period. And that's particularly difficult. And part of the requirements of our partnership with the New York Times is that everything needs to be presented as accurately as possible. Even in the opinion journalism department of the Times, everything has to be perfect. So there was no room for error or misrepresentation. And we just, our team, Nick and Sarah Stewart and Elizabeth, and there's a whole team of people who track down shot by shot, clip by clip, all of that archival material. You know, there's a part where he sees the photo of a black pilot on the upper fold of the black newspaper that he's delivering, you know, tracking down that newspaper and then tracking down the original photograph that newspaper used represents maybe 3 thrilling seconds of the movie and, you know, several days of research.
Yeah, the work goes in.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun and what makes watching a documentary like that such a rich experience, because, you know, that's great art and a great entertainment experience when you get something that's so reduced and so so many rich things all in sequence, and we're always aiming for that.
No, absolutely. Well, with obviously, as you said, I mean, you know, many people have shared the story over the years, you know, of Edward Dwight Jr. What with this, you know, incredible series that you're creating with the New York Times, what kind of scope did you want your audience to take from your version of this documentary with Ed Dwight Jr.? What do you kind of want your audience to take from it?
Well, I think honestly the overarching thing that I think the Almost Famous series kind of begs the question of is, if this person whose story I'm experiencing is not a well-known person by virtue of this mistake or this injustice or this one decision, then are the people who I admire because they're well-known or famous that deserving of it, right? And who are all the other people who probably should be famous that aren't, right? And so to me, that's like the interesting examination, is it really undermines the idea that those who are household names are there because they deserved it, right? And there may be a lot of other factors and reasons, including luck, of why they're there. And so I think there's an underlying idea in our society that if you're famous or if you're a billionaire or if you are extremely powerful, there's something special about you. There's something that is divinely chosen about you to play that role. And I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of it, in fact, most of it, has to do with underlying social biases, luck, inherited power, etc. And, you know, sort of the secret goal of the series is to try to nibble around the edges of that and poke at that.
I love that. I love that. I really do love that. And I love that this is a continual series that we're getting to experience. Is there any way we can kind of continue to watch the work that you're doing, or what is next for you that you can share so we can kind of find more about you?
Yeah. So, you know, my company is called Breakwater Studios. So you can always follow us on Twitter or Instagram and hear what we're up to. On the Almost Famous front, we are continuing. In fact, I'm here in Mississippi making the next group of them. And the hope is that we can continue to make them. There's you know, one thing about this series is there's just like thousands of people whose stories imminently need to be told. Many of them are older people. And so we hope that it can be an ongoing series. And we also hope that we can adapt these stories into narrative feature films, into, in some cases, longer form documentaries, and that this can be a great watershed of storytelling for myself as a filmmaker and our company.
Fantastic. And yeah, do check out your company. It's quite amazing. I was reading about it, about your search to greatness, and it's very wondrous what you've achieved thus far in your career, and it's very inspiring to many people out there. Which leads me on to finalize and say, you know, for you as a documentary filmmaker, it takes a certain kind of person to make a certain kind of film, and it's very interesting because your heart's got to be in something that you're, you know, obviously making and creating. Is there any advice out there you could share with any filmmaker, particularly documentary filmmaker, that kind of want to follow in your footsteps? Any advice that you go by in your everyday, literally on set life?
I know. Wear your seatbelt. Yeah, I think, yeah, what advice would I have? I think honestly, the big thing is you have to, I think one of the hardest things to do is to create a belief within yourself that what you think is a good story is a good story. And it doesn't mean you'll be without self-doubt in your life, but you need to cultivate a group of friends and colleagues that help foster more confidence than self-doubt in yourself. Because if you think something's a really good story and you think that you've got a good nose for story, then that's probably enough of a two-part mechanism for you to figure out how to get a film made. And I think so many talented filmmakers are stymied by self-doubt and kind of internal modesty that why should they, you know, be the ones to, you know, tell this story, or why should they be the ones to pick what's a good story or not. And so I would just encourage young filmmakers to go and make films. If they think it's a good story, it's probably because it is. And they're probably tapping into something that a lot of people will agree with. So I always encourage young filmmakers to surround themselves with people who encourage them and who plus up their ideas when they say, I was thinking about this could make a good documentary. You really want to surround yourself with a group of people that say yes and, rather than, I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. I think that's very important as a young filmmaker.
Yeah, I know. I love that. And I love also what you mentioned at the virtual film festival about just when you first, you know, telling that first person, you know, it can be, you know, significant, you know, in a film. So that relates to the importance of having, you know, good people around you. Well, listen, Ben, best wishes the rest of your shoot and the continual series of Almost Famous. And thank you for joining us today and being part of NewFilmmakers LA. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So nice to be with you today. And thanks for showcasing the film, Danny.